So guys, yeah, maybe turn your video, your mics off. Okay, welcome everybody as you join us. Welcome, come on in. Great to see people coming in. We've got a lot of people coming in tonight. So yeah, already over 200 of you coming in. So hello, hi everybody. And Marie, Ian, Rosie, Elizabeth, Adam, David, good evening to you all. Great that you're joining us. Hi from Edinburgh. Lovely. And hello from Norwich. Lovely to see you, Roy. Yeah, do let us know where you're joining us from. We're always interested to know. So good evening. Come on in. Somebody from Macau. Wow, that's terrific. I don't have to think what the time is there. And Sutton in Surrey. I'm still trying to work out in my head what time. I know what the time difference is to Sutton, but I don't know what it is to Macau. But I'm presuming it's middle of the night. We've got Birmingham, Kent, Leeds, Brighton, Hampshire, Granite City, Market Harborough. Welcome, everybody. Too many of you coming in for me to call out the names, but welcome. It's great that you're joining us. Lancashire, Wirral, my part of the world, Cambridgeshire, and brilliant to have you all here. Guildford, somebody from Kuwait, and which is good. So yes, but living in Manchester. And then very excited to have some virtual Wanderlust escapism. Thank you, Sarah Griffiths. That's really good. Somebody from Copenhagen, welcome. And somebody joining us from Miami, Florida. Gosh, you're having an interesting week over there, aren't you? And hi, New Zealander in Bavaria at the moment. Somebody else from Scotland, somebody from Yorkshire, more Scotland, Bath, Birmingham. So we're very cosmopolitan on here. Right, so welcome, come on in from Worcester and Dubai, from Wales, from Italy. So terrific. Vancouver, Canada. Hello, Christine. Lovely that you're joining us. So we're just going to give it a couple more minutes for people to come in, as we've got a lot of people here tonight. And Macau, right, we've heard it's GMT +8. So, gosh, is that 4:30 in the morning? No, that's not, it isn't, is it? My maths is terrible. Anyway, 2:30 in the morning. And then hello from Copenhagen. And so we've got at least 2 people joining us from Denmark. Shropshire, rainy Telford. Oh dear. Yeah, the weather's been horrible here. Hello, somebody's supposed to be working in Portland, Oregon. So welcome. Yes, it's much more fun to join us instead. We've got Cheshire, Teddington, Derbyshire, London. Somebody who used to live in Japan was, John Godfrey. So welcome. So terrific to have you all on here. We're just going to give it another couple of minutes. It always takes a few minutes to get people in. So welcome if you're just joining us. And Essex. Oh dear, somebody's saying that he should be in Japan at the moment, but he's in Kent. Somebody in Arnside, one of my favourite places, up in Cumbria. And yeah, so all around the country, and as you can see, overseas. Somebody from Gloucestershire, somebody from Oxford. Brilliant. Harpenden in Hertfordshire. So, and yes, those of us in the UK, it is again pretty horrible outside, really wet and rainy. So I'm hoping we're going to be transported to some sunnier, warmer climes this evening. So Birkenhead, oh, my dad was from Birkenhead. So yeah, great part of the world. Carlisle, Cornwall. Right, welcome if you're just joining us. So what we're going to do, as everybody's coming in, we always want to know who is joining us, not only from where they're from, but also, of course, have you been to Japan or not? Because that will really help our experts tonight to know who's in the room. So we're going to do a quick poll. So if you could fill the poll in, it should hope to be really simple. Whether you've been to Japan, whether you're actively thinking about it, or whether you want to know more. And I'm just watching the figures, and yeah, so great to see. There's been a lot of you who clearly been to Japan already, but you obviously love it, the fact that you joined us tonight, and no doubt want to explore new places in Japan. And then, yes, other people who are thinking about going. So thank you so much for that. So, as I say, yeah, welcome everybody. And I'm Lynn Hughes. I'm the founder and the editor of Wanderlust, and I'm really looking forward to this evening. And because I'm lucky enough to have been to Japan twice, but I'm painfully aware that I've only scratched the surface of it. I've seen such a small part of it, and so, like you, I'm hoping to get lots of really good ideas tonight. So, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to introduce you to our main speaker tonight, Rebecca. And her talk will be followed by a Q&A where we'll be joined by other experts. You can see them all on the screen now. And that will be your chance to ask questions. So, in fact, while Rebecca's talking as well, do feel free to use the chat function to ask your questions. But first of all, before we hear from Rebecca, let's just get ourselves in the mood and see a video of our favourite country. Right. Let's... All right, terrific. Well, that I think really showed us the diversity of Japan, both geographically and also, of course, by season, which is what we're going to be hearing about from our expert speaker tonight, Rebecca. So Rebecca Hallett, she's a UK-based travel writer, and she said that since before she can remember, Japan's exerted a special kind of pull on her. And so she actually did a degree in Japanese studies before she'd even visited the country. But since then, she has been to the country many, many times. When I asked her how many, she genuinely couldn't remember. And so, Rebecca, it's a real pleasure to have you here tonight. And let's hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. It is a pleasure to be here tonight as well. And thank you as well for that amazing video. It's almost a little hard to watch not being able to go there right now, especially because so many of those places are places I still haven't been. I know I can't go everywhere, but I'm going to try my very hardest. Just before I get into it, I want to say as well, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the latest issue of Wanderlust, a lot of which is dedicated to Japan. If you haven't, please go out and get a copy. It's got some really good stuff in it. There's an amazing, multi-page trip planner article from Rob Goss, which is brilliant. I'm going to mention a few of the places in that article and that you saw in that video, and hopefully a few others as well. It's also brilliant to be here on this panel with Matt from the JNTO and Alastair from Inside Japan. Matt's had a few emails from me over the years in my research trips to Japan, so sorry, Matt, thank you for your help. And just before all of this lockdown madness started, I was lucky enough to be in Japan with Inside Japan tours. As you can imagine, my level that I require from tour guides in Japan is probably a little bit too high, but they really exceeded my expectations, so I can't recommend them highly enough. Just before I really get into this, I just want to make a quick note. I'm not going to be talking about COVID because, well, firstly, Matt might have more information than me, but also just because, you know, it's changing so fast anyway, you should check all these things before you're able to go anyway. But the great thing about doing a talk about Japan through the seasons is that I can guarantee it will be one of these when you're able to go. So you should be fine. Okay. Right, we're going to start off with the very basics. What are the seasons in Japan? I'm sure most of you know this, so I'll be very quick. It's in the Northern Hemisphere like us, so 4 seasons. You've got spring, March to May. You've got summer, June to August. You've got autumn, which is September to November. And you've got winter, which is December to February. But having said that, Japan is not just really big, it's quite a long country. So in different parts of the country, whether you're in the mountains or by the coast, whether you're in the north or in the south, it can be quite different even at the same time of year. So here is a map to give you a bit of an orientation. Japan's made up of about 6,800 islands in all. The 4 main ones you can clearly see in the middle there. And about 400 of the islands overall are inhabited. So there's a lot of Japan to explore. From end to end, it's around 1,900 miles or 3,000 kilometers. To give you a point of comparison, the Land's End to John O'Groats route in the UK is about half of that. So it's a lot longer than we are here. The northernmost point of Hokkaido, which is the northernmost of those 4 main islands, that is on about the same latitude as Milan in Italy, as Montreal in Canada, or as Portland in Oregon. And I know we have at least one viewer in Portland, so there you go. The southernmost point is on Hateruma Island, the southernmost inhabited point. And that's part of Okinawa, which you can see just at the bottom there, just poking off the bottom of the map. That's on the same latitude approximately as Abu Dhabi, as Key West in Florida, or as Varanasi in India. So you can imagine with that much range, there is a lot of difference throughout the seasons. I'm going to show you some graphs now. Don't worry, you don't need to pay that much attention. These are all from, as you can see, WeatherSpark. So this is a useful site if you're planning a trip. You can compare a place that you know well with somewhere you don't in terms of the rainfall, the sunny hours, all of those things. One sec. So here I've put in the yellow is Naha, which is very south in Japan, in Okinawa. Then you've got the dark blue, which is Sapporo, which is very north. And then you've got Tokyo in red, and then you've got London on there for comparison. Even if you can't read the numbers on those, you can see that there's quite a range going on. But broadly speaking, I'll move you away from the graphs now. Sorry about them. The further south you go, the warmer it's going to be, the longer the summers are going to be, the earlier the cherry blossom will arrive. And the later the winter will arrive, the later the autumn leaves will arrive. And as you go north, it's the opposite. One of the things that you need to bear in mind about the seasons when you're planning a trip to Japan is the rainy season. The photos in this which don't have a credit on them are either me or my partner. He is a good photographer. I am not. You can probably tell which ones are mine. This is one of mine. I took this in Hokkaido when I was there during the rainy season a few years ago. I think it's beautiful, but a lot of people don't like to travel in the rainy season because, well, it's rainy. It's not a monsoon season. You're more likely to have days of drizzle or sudden downpours. But you want to factor that in, and it really is rainy in the peak of the season, which is usually August or September. In Tokyo, almost half of the days are rainy, so you do need to, at the very least, pack for it. You do also need to consider the typhoon season. So this picture is from a hike just north of Kyoto, and this was taken in April 2019. And this is some of the aftermath from a typhoon in September 2018, which was a particularly bad one. Typhoon season is almost half the year. It's around May to October. So you absolutely shouldn't not go during typhoon season, but you do need to be prepared for it. Make sure you've got travel insurance in case your flight is cancelled or something like that. And be prepared for some things to be closed. As you can imagine, this hiking route was closed for a little while they just cleared dead trees out of the way and made sure it was safe for everyone to walk it again. And it was long open by the time I got there in April. There are a whole number of typhoons that appear out in the ocean, but not that many of them actually make landfall. In Okinawa, maybe like 7 per year, but on the main islands, it's usually more like 3 that will hit, 2 or 3. And Japan is very, very well prepared for it. So just it's something to think about, but not to stress about too much. You should also plan your trip around holidays. Japan has a huge domestic tourism market. So when it's the holiday time in Japan, it's a lot more expensive and it's a lot more congested. So the school holidays are July and August. You might see a bit more then. But the main things to bear in mind are 3 periods of the year. Firstly is Oshogatsu, which is New Year. And in Japan, that's celebrated around the December to January point rather than Chinese New Year. The second time to bear in mind is Golden Week. That's usually in April or May. And that's a cluster of national holidays around which most people take the bulk of their annual leave. So it really is a lot more expensive then. This picture is from Children's Day, which is one of the holidays in Golden Week. And the third one to bear in mind is Obon, which is in mid-August. A lot of people go home to their families then. It's a traditional festival, a little bit like the Mexican Day of the Dead, kind of, in that it's about sort of celebrating people's spirits returning. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the question, why do we talk about the seasons so much when we talk about Japan? Obviously, wherever you go in the world, the weather will be different at different times. That's just a fact. Why do we always talk about that when we talk about Japan? Well, 2 reasons. The first one, the seasons really are quite distinct. There's a lot of variation across the year. But secondly, and I think more importantly, the changing of the seasons is a really important thing in Japanese culture and in Japanese people's perception of their country and what makes it unique and special. While we here might know, oh, when the leaves start to fall off the trees, that's autumn, obviously. When it's sunny, that's summer, obviously. In Japan, I think there is more awareness of the signs of the seasons changing for most people. So we all know about the cherry blossom. That's a global symbol of Japan and associated with the spring. But let's say it's summertime. If you see the irises blooming, if you hear the sort of lazy buzzing of the cicadas in the evening, or if you see the glow of fireflies, you know that that's summer, and everyone knows that those are signs of summer in Japan. Traditionally, Japan has 24 sub-seasons, which are called seki, and it has 72 micro-seasons, which are called ko. Anyone with the most basic grasp of maths can tell that 52 weeks in a year, 72 micro-seasons means that they really are micro-seasons. Now, I don't want you to go away with the impression that this is something everyone has on their calendars and that everyone can just reel these off at a moment's notice. That's not the case. They're very much a traditional cultural thing, but people do have an awareness of some of them. So Rishun is the traditional start of spring of the sub-seasons, the seki, and that's in February. And everyone kind of knows that one because it's the first one and it's a big one, so everyone kind of has an awareness. But all of the examples I gave you just now of summer, for example, the irises, like the slide in front of you right now, those are all traditional micro-seasons. So just in case you're interested, June the 11th to the 15th is Kusaretaru Kusahotaru Tonaru, which means the rotten grass becomes fireflies. Then June the 27th to July the 1st is Ayame Hana Saku, irises bloom, as you can see. And then August the 13th to the 17th is Higurashi Naku, evening cicadas sing. So people do have an awareness of this, and I think the seasons are very tied into Japanese culture, and that's why we talk about them. There are also a lot of seasonal festivals throughout the year, and if you get a chance to go to one, you absolutely should. But even if you can't, you can still enjoy seasonal foods. As you can see here, these are beautiful handmade little sweets. I think the second ones in are wisteria, so you should be able to guess roughly what time of year these are from. I'm not going to tell you all the foods because we just don't have time, but I'll give you a few examples for each season. So in spring, you'll see a lot of things with ume, which is Japanese plum or apricot, which you might know from umeshu, plum wine. There'll be food with cherry blossoms, and there'll be some really light, fresh vegetables like snow peas or bamboo shoots. In summer, a favorite dish is unagi, which is a kind of grilled eel. It's supposed to give you strength and stamina on the humid, hot, lazy days of summer. But also there'll be a lot of foods to take the edge off the heat. So kakigori, which is shaved ice, drenched in sweet syrups like green tea flavor or melon flavor is popular. Plus things like fresh watermelon and cold noodles instead of hot noodles. In autumn, there are a lot of cakes that are shaped like maple leaves to nod to the changing of the leaves, and also a lot of produce like squashes and persimmons and chestnuts. And then in winter, obviously, you want warming, hearty dishes like hot pots and stews, so like nabe or oden, and also even warming desserts like zenzai or oshiruko, which are both red bean and mochi rice cake desserts. And also my personal favorite, amazake, which is a sweet rice-based drink that you have hot in the winter months. So now I'm going to move on to a few more specific recommendations for you. I'm not going to be able to cover everything as much as I would like to, but I'm going to give you a mix of a few different things for each season. So there'll be the big hitters, but mostly I'm going to focus on less well-known destinations or events. You might notice there's a particular focus on the north of Japan in my recommendations. There are a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, only about 2% of international visitors go to Tohoku, which is the northern half of the main island of Japan, so north of Tokyo. I don't understand why the number is so low. It is a hugely diverse region with a number of amazing cities, beautiful rural agricultural areas, mountains, coastline. It's brilliant. And I also want to recommend it because 2021 marks the 10-year anniversary of the earthquake and tsunami in 2011. It's a really great time to go to help the communities that are still rebuilding, and to give yourself a different impression of that region than what you would have seen in the news at that time. A lot of it's been rebuilt, a lot of it was not too badly affected in the first place, and it's all a stunning natural area, which is now a national park called the Sanriku Fukko Reconstruction National Park. So, okay, on to my recommendations. My first recommendation is wildlife spotting in Hokkaido, which is the northernmost of the 4 main islands. These are red-crowned cranes, which are a symbol of Japan, to the extent that if you fly with Japan Airlines, you might notice that their logo is a red-crowned crane. More than half of the world's population is in Hokkaido, and you can see them really, really easily in Kushiro, which is in eastern Hokkaido, which is the largest marshland area in Japan. And you are pretty much guaranteed a sighting because there are certain breeding areas and places you can go to spot them. You can also, in Hokkaido, around the beginning of spring, see Steller sea eagles, which I believe are the most powerful eagle in the world. I don't know how you work that out, but that's what I've been told. And white-tailed eagles as well, and seals. And all 3 of those you can see on the drift ice. It is the most southerly place in the world which gets Arctic drift ice. And when I say it gets Arctic drift ice, I don't mean a little chunk here and there. I mean, you can go out and walk on the ice on the ocean. It's quite remarkable. You can also off the drift ice. You can see, if you're lucky, Blakiston's fish owl, which is very rare. It is the largest owl in the world, and it is huge. It's incredible. You can also see orca, and you can see bed beaked whales as well. Plus, in April, you might see some brown bears emerging, especially in Shiretoko National Park in the northeast of Hokkaido. I should add a quick note there, though. Obviously, especially when the bears are coming out of hibernation, you want to be extra careful. You should not be going looking for them on land. But you can actually go on boat trips along the coastline, and you'll see a lot of them out along the beaches, which is a safe way to do that, and to be frank, a lot more respectful of the bears, who probably are tired and hungry after all that time. So I'm going to go on next to something at the opposite end of the country, Okinawa. So springtime is a particularly good time to visit Okinawa because the temperature is a little bit lower than it will be in summer, and you'll be beating the rainy season, which usually arrives around May. The beaches will start opening in March. Every beach in Okinawa basically is open and ready for use by the end of April. And if you go in March, so at the beginning of this time period, you might even be able to catch the end of a humpback whale migration off the Kerama Islands. So that's another really special wildlife experience you can have. My final recommendation for springtime is, while in Okinawa you can see the early cherry blossoms, in the north of Japan you can see the late cherry blossoms. So this photograph is from Fukushima, which is one of my favorite cities in Japan. I love the whole area. This place is called Hanami Yama, and Hanami is blossom viewing and Yama is mountain. So, I mean, the clue's really in the name for that one. They've got a lot of different types of cherry trees that bloom at different times. So it has a really long season, and you can see late blooming ones without the crowds you get at the peak. Elsewhere in the prefecture of Fukushima, which is a very large prefecture, you can go to Kitakata City, which has some really amazing ceramic traditions as well, which I have a bit of a weakness for. And you can go to the Nichu line. This is a decommissioned railway line, which is about 3 kilometers long, and you can go walking along it. And it is lined with approximately 1,000 weeping cherry trees. So you've got this kind of curtain of pink blossoms around you as you're walking along. It's absolutely beautiful. On to summer now. How am I doing for time? Doing okay. I want to fit in everything and I don't have time, so you have to forgive me. Right, this is summer. I know this picture doesn't look like summer, but you'll have to trust me. This was taken in June 2019 in the Japan Alps in central Japan. I got on a cable car wearing sandals, and then I got off the cable car at the top and realized I'd made a terrible mistake. The thing is that with a country like Japan with mountains all the way through the middle, you still have snow on the peaks into summer in a lot of places. But I'm going to start you off with something a little bit more traditionally summery. So these are the Ogasawara Islands, which are technically part of Tokyo. Very technically, because they're about 600 miles or 1,000 kilometers away from the city of Tokyo. You can take a ferry from Tokyo and it takes around 24 hours to get there. So it's quite a commitment. You need to stay there for a few days. But the Ogasawara Islands form a national park. And as you can imagine from somewhere so remote, it's a completely unique ecosystem. You can see wildlife, you can see landscapes that you can't see elsewhere, and they're relatively unspoiled. Only 2 of the islands are inhabited, and I really love this. They're called Chichijima and Hahajima, and that means Father Island and Mother Island. So that's pretty cute. You can avoid the rainy season of summer by going to Ogasawara because, along with Hokkaido, it's one of the only parts of Japan that doesn't really get the rainy season. You can go hiking, you can go kayaking, snorkeling, scuba diving, whatever you want. There's a whole load of stuff to do there. Surfing, you can imagine. And in terms of wildlife, you are fairly likely to see bottlenose dolphins and spinner dolphins, plus manta rays, green sea turtles nest on a couple of the uninhabited islands which you can visit. And there are a lot of other species which are unique to the archipelago as well. My next recommendation for you is a classic of summer in Japan, which is spotting fireflies. It's such a popular activity that a lot of places actually have fireflies shipped in, especially. There's nothing wrong with that, you still get the same effect, but I think it's particularly magical to see them somewhere where they are just living naturally. The main thing they need for that is very clean, pure water. So that means one of the best places you can go is central Japan, around the central Japan Alps. This is very easily accessible from Tokyo and from the Kyoto area as well. There are a lot of rail passes covering the area. And you do want to be a bit flexible if you want to go and see this, because the fireflies glow like this only during the mating period, which is usually around 10 days at the end of June. There are a couple of different varieties of fireflies, so you might be able to see one if you miss another, but it's still quite a specific window of opportunity. The two places I will recommend are both in that central Japan area. One of them is in Minakami, which is a town in the mountains of Gunma Prefecture. They have the Tsukinoyo Firefly Village, so it's another one where the clue is really in the name. And the other one is just northwest of Gifu City, which is very, very easily accessible on the train, is Motosu Hotaru Park, or Motosu Firefly Park. So again, inventive naming, but very helpful for people wanting to see the fireflies. And then lastly, for summer, I have to recommend summer festivals. I think it's the law. I just have to. There are so many to choose from all the way through the country. You might well just stumble upon one while you're traveling. But in northern Japan, in Tohoku, not only is it slightly more temperate at that time of year, slightly, but you also have the Sandai Matsuri, which are the three great festivals, and they really live up to the name. The first one, which is early August, these are all grouped into just a few days, so you can very feasibly go from one to the other. The first one is the Akita Kanto Matsuri. Now, all three of these festivals have, people in traditional dress, processions through the streets, music, dancing, food stalls, alcohol, whatever you want. It's all at all of them. But they each have something that makes them unique. And the Kanto Matsuri in Akita, they have these long bamboo poles with paper lanterns on them. Some of them are extremely tall and extremely heavy, and people will train for weeks or months ahead of the festival to balance them on their hands, on their hips, on their shoulders, even on their heads while they're moving through the procession. So it's quite an impressive sight. The second of the three festivals is the one that's pictured here, which is the Aomori Nebuta Festival. This is one where they have these incredible floats, like you can see, which are made every year, especially for the festival. And you can see them being made if you go early, if you go a few weeks early. And then they're lit up from inside and pushed through the streets as part of the processions. And they kind of move around and dance and fight sometimes. And it's a lot of fun. The third one is the Tanabata Festival in Sendai, which is a very big, bustling, exciting city. And they have these beautiful, colorful decorations and streamers all throughout the city, and it all culminates in what is basically one big street party. So I don't know what's not to like there, really. We'll move on next to autumn, when the weather cools off and the humidity lifts. So this is just a really good time to be in Japan, I think, anyway, in terms of the temperature and the weather. And the first recommendation I'm going to make, I should have forewarned you about that picture, sorry. The first picture is of sumo, and I know that has very little to do with the weather. But in the autumn, you have 2 of the 6 yearly sumo tournaments. In September, there is one in Tokyo. And then in November, there is one in Fukuoka, which is a really friendly, laid-back city down in Kyushu, with very good food stalls. But that's beside the point. If you go to the one in Tokyo, the stadium is right opposite the Edo Tokyo Museum, which is really great, a lot of fun, and great to do if the weather's not so good that day and you want to flip between a couple of things. Sumo, I really think, is one of the most ridiculously, unexpectedly fun experiences I had in Japan. I'm not into sports. Turns out I love sumo. It's brilliant. The tournaments you'll buy a ticket for an entire day, and they start off at the beginning with the low-ranked wrestlers and build up through the day to the high-ranked wrestlers, who are generally, national celebrities, international celebrities, some of them. Earlier on in the day, when it's the lower-ranked wrestlers, most people won't have shown up yet, so you get a really good opportunity to go down nearer the ring and actually see what's going on very well, even if you have tickets for the cheap seats at the back. I don't know if you're allowed to do this, but that's what I did. So I hope that Alastair won't tell me off for that, or Matt. Sorry, guys. It's, like I say, a lot of fun. You can add on a visit sometimes to the sumo training stables if you want to see more and learn how they train. But the athleticism, the atmosphere, I can't recommend it highly enough. My next recommendation is to celebrate the rice harvest. One of the best regions, I think, for doing this is around Tono in northeast Japan. And that's where I took this picture. This is actually in summertime, but as you can see from the landscape here, you kind of have these big flat plains in between the mountainous areas, which means it's really, really good for cycling around. And as it's a very rural agricultural area, you'll see quite a lot of activity around the rice harvest, which is really fascinating. There are lots of places where you can join in and help with the rice harvest as well. Don't just start pitching in if you go past a farmer who's taking in the rice, ask in advance. I think it's just polite. But you can also around this time enjoy a lot of rice and rice products. My personal favorite, and don't judge me, is Nihonshu, which you might know as sake. It's delicious and I love it. October the 1st is National Sake Day. So there are usually a few promotions and special events going on around that. But also around that time of year is something called the Aki Agari, which is the autumn opening of last year's bottlings of sake. So it's the only time of the year when you can taste sake at that particular point of its development into being a mature sake drink. You can visit a lot of breweries if you want to find out more. In Tokyo, in actual Tokyo City, there is only one official sake brewery. It's called the Tokyo Port Brewery in Minato. And elsewhere in the country, my two favorites are both in northeastern Japan. There is Otokoyama in Kisenuma, which was one of the worst hit towns by the tsunami. And the brewery is excellent. The sake is brilliant. And the owner also speaks fluent English. So it's really great if you want to get insight but are a little worried about the language. The other is Hachinohe Shizo in Hachinohe, which is right at the top of that section of the coast. And to be honest, it's just one of the best value sake tours I've ever had. It's in a beautiful old building, and you pay about 500 yen and get to have so many samples of it. And the staff are very friendly, helpful, personable. It's great. I may have been influenced by how much I drank, but trust me, it was great. Next up, I would like to, miss a slide. There's a missing slide here, but you'll just have to trust me that you should enjoy the autumn colours. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay, I see what's happened. I'll just switch around my presentation. It'll be fine. October rather, is a great time to go to Kyoto for these two festivals that both happen on the same day. I know I said I would mostly recommend less visited places, and Kyoto is obviously high up on everyone's list, but this is such a unique opportunity that I just couldn't help recommending it to you. So this in the picture here is part of the Jidai Matsuri, which is to commemorate the return of the emperor to power, I believe, in 1868. So it's kind of this elegant, almost solemn procession in parts of people in traditional clothing. There's traditional music as well. It's just a very, very beautiful procession through the city. In the evening, you can go into the mountains, and I wish I had a good photo of this for you. You'll just have to imagine, to a village called Kurama, where there is a fire festival. The locals are in traditional dress. Sometimes that can be just a loincloth for some of them, so you are forewarned. And they carry these massive flaming torches through the town to the shrine. Some of these torches weigh as much as 80 kilograms. So it's really no joke. And the atmosphere is raucous and fun, and everyone gets involved, and there's a lot of noise and movement and fire and could not be more different to the Jidai Matsuri. So it's a really special thing to experience. Okay, now we're on to this one. Obviously, autumn, the leaves, you want to watch them. And I would recommend that you go again to the north of Japan to Towada Hachimantai National Park for this. The lower part of the park, because it's split into two, is the Hachimantai area, which is very mountainous. And you can drive, you can hike, you can go mountain biking, whatever you want. And you kind of get the effect of the sea of leaves underneath you when you get onto these higher trails and roads. It's beautiful. This picture is from the northern section of the park, the Towada area. And this is Oirase Gorge, which I actually found to be a very surprisingly British landscape. I'm from near Dartmoor, and it really reminded me of that in places. And then it empties out into Lake Towada, which is surrounded by a wide variety of trees that all kind of change different colours at different times, which is lovely. The other advantage of going to this area, which is a little bit more touristed than the Hachimantai area, is that you can add on a visit to the Towada Art Center in Towada City, which is, for my money, one of the best contemporary art museums in the whole of Japan, and really under-visited, I think, by international tourists. We will move on now to winter. Also, there are a lot of winter festivals, but I'm not going to talk about them because I've already told you about a few too many festivals, I think. So the first thing I would recommend is snow viewing baths, which is yukimiburo. Yes, there is a word for that in Japanese. My personal favorite place for this is Nyuto Onsen, which is up in the snow country in northern Japan. You have 7 different hot springs, each of which has its own traditional inn attached to it. And you can go out and bathe in these mineral-rich waters outside while the snow falls around you. And it's a beautiful experience. You can also do this in the area of Jigokudani, which is where the Japanese macaques bathe in the hot springs. There is a town nearby called Shibu Onsen, where you can go to lots of different baths, and you can see the monkeys when it's a little bit less crowded as well. Or you could really go all in and stay at Korakukan, which is an inn right next to the monkey park, where firstly, they are fine with you having tattoos. A lot of hot springs are not fine with that. And secondly, you might be lucky enough while you're using the outdoor bath to have a couple of macaques come and join you on the opposite side. So it's a really unique experience. I also would recommend, obviously, winter sports. Yes, that's me. I'm a very beginner skier, don't judge me. This is actually from my trip to central Hokkaido, to Tomamu Resort with Inside Japan Tours early this year, which was a lot of fun. Anyone watching this who's into skiing or snowboarding, you will have heard of Hakuba, Niseko, Shigakogen, some of the big Japanese resorts. But actually there are over 500 throughout the country. You can ski, you can snowboard, you can go tubing, sledding, you can go snowshoeing, snowmobiling, whatever you want. If you're in Hokkaido, you might also be able to try out a traditional thing called yuki-ita, which is kind of in between a sled, a snowboard, and a surfboard. It's a wooden board with a strap on the front, and you use it to launch yourself down the beautiful, glittering powder snowdrifts. So it's quite an interesting experience. And finally, that is not cherry blossom, that is plum blossom, which blooms in February, the early signs of spring. Odawara is a really great place to go for this. It's in between Tokyo and Hakone. A lot of people change trains there and don't stop in Odawara. But in February, they have this plum festival, which includes the area around the castle, which has about 250 trees, and a larger area with about 35,000 trees, plus tea ceremonies, poetry recitals, dancing, and even horseback archery. So I'm just going to wrap up now. Thank you so much for listening. I just want to make my final point, which is you really can't plan for the weather, no matter where you go, no matter what season it is. And the most memorable experiences will often be the unexpected ones. This photo was taken on just any old day. We weren't there for any particular reason. It's just out of the window of my hotel room in Morioka, this beautiful, beautiful sunset. So I hope that you will remain open to going to Japan at any time. And as soon as it is safe to travel there again, I really hope that I will see you there. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Oh
Thank
gosh,
you,
I mean, that was really inspiring. I mean, I've been scribbling away. It gave me so many ideas. And in fact, I should mention straight away, because a few people asked on the chat about getting something with the place names or would they be able to get recording and so on. And yes, what we will do in the next couple of days is we'll be sending everybody who's on here tonight, we'll be sending you a link to a recording of tonight. We will also send you, and I'm sure Rebecca is very happy with us, we'll send you a list of the key places that were mentioned. And so
if there's anything in particular, ask in the chat if there's anything you're unsure about, but I'll make sure that all the place names I mentioned are fully written out for you in English rather than Japanese. So
yeah, that would be brilliant. And of course, we'll include any other kind of useful info in there as well, useful links or whatever. And but I think it's probably time to be joined by our panel tonight anyway. So if we could have our two panelists join us, and that is, have they come up? Yeah, there's Alastair Donnelly. Welcome, Alastair. Hi, and Alastair from the specialist travel company Inside Japan Tours. Brilliant, and I saw you were engaging in the chat anyway. And also welcome to Matthew Joslin of the Japan National Tourism Organisation. So brilliant to have you both join us. And so as you'll have seen, we had quite a few questions coming up anyway. In fact, if I could just first of all pick up with one on you, Rebecca, which was about, you mentioned about the rice harvest and that people can get involved. But in what way do you mean get involved? You actually go out and pick the rice.
Yeah, you can. There are... Oh, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Go try again.
Okay. You can. You can get involved in the sense of actually helping to harvest the rice. There are some places in the area of Tono, which I mentioned, Tono. But there are various sort of agriturismo sort of places you can go to where you can stay in a farmhouse and help out with the harvest. Sometimes it's just a kind of cursory bit of helping out, just so you can get an experience of it. But you can also, with things like WWOOF, Willing Workers on Organic Farms, I think it means, you can go and stay for free at an actual working farm, and then you stay in exchange for your labour, helping with the harvest. So you can do that, or you can just kind of cycle around and have a look if you don't really want to go up to your knees in mud. But it is fun.
Okay, we'll take your word for it. Alastair, obviously, so you run a travel company specialising in the area. So we noticed, well over half the people on here tonight have never been to Japan. So where should they start, as in planning it? Because we've just had all those amazing ideas, and I know now, and I've even been twice, and I'm thinking, oh, good grief, when I go again, I mean, there's just so many ideas there. So for a first timer, should a first timer kind of tick off the big sites, or would you suggest something a little bit different?
I think that it's a good question. It's a good question. One of the problems with Japan is there is so much. There's absolutely endless choices, endless things you can do. I often say to people, the only thing you can't do in Japan is safari. But even that, I wonder, you can kind of do some wildlife safaris.
Yeah.
So,
I think there are.
Matt and I went and did a little wildlife thing, didn't we?
Yeah.
You can certainly go and look for bears. That's kind of fun. Although be careful of the bears, as we were advised during Rebecca's presentation. What I'd say is that there's so much to do in Japan, but don't just be pulled in by what's most voluminous on the internet. There are the kind of classic places to visit in Japan. It's like Tokyo, it's Hakone, it's Kyoto, it's Hiroshima and Miyajima, and that's the Golden Route, Osaka as well. But these are extraordinary places. But they are where everybody goes. And there's a lot to be said for getting away from those places to some of the areas that Rebecca's shown us. Like she said, in the north of Tokyo, the Tohoku region, only 2% of of all tourists to Japan visit that area, and it's huge and it is beautiful and it offers so much. And I think that, you know, there's what the internet has given people is a bit of a fear of missing out. Because you read these things about the famous sites and it just makes them more famous, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing. The more you read about a particular place in Kyoto, the more you think, oh, I have to go there. But actually, when I talk to our clients, it's never those places that they come back and they say, yeah, that was what made my trip. Very, very rarely. The only place that really does that is when people get that view of Mount Fuji. That is the one kind of classic thing that people say, wow, it really moved me. And it was the fulfillment of a dream. Of course, the problem with Mount Fuji, very, very shy mountain. So unless you go in the winter, you're not by any means guaranteed to get that view.
Okay.
But so I'd say, look beyond those classic things. Think about the things you enjoy doing and take a risk. Take a risk, because there's nowhere in Japan that disappoints. There's also nowhere you can't go. There's nowhere you can't visit. Every single town or village in Japan has good quality accommodation. It's got restaurants. It's got tourist facilities. As Rebecca said, I think it's the largest domestic tourism market in the world. That means they have great infrastructure. So yeah, do a bit of research, find out what you like, see what you think is great, that's out there. And then, of course, what I'd say is talk to a professional.
Well, yes, you would say that. But absolutely right. Obviously, yeah, I do agree. Okay, and then Matt, obviously, and you're here representing the tourist office, and again, a complete Japan nut. You and I travelled together last year in Japan and had a very memorable time. But just picking up on that, would you sort of say the same? Because I can imagine a first timer, they do want to see somewhere like, for instance, Kyoto. But is there something a couple of people have asked about undiscovered gems or places that aren't so obvious? You know, is there somewhere that you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, difficult question. Obviously, I'm supposed to give a totally unbiased opinion when it comes to places in Japan. But I would say that my personal preference, in kind of all the times that I've traveled to Japan and, you know, all the experiences I've had from, you know, top to toe, would definitely be that northern Japan region. And I know it's been mentioned already quite a bit. So Rebecca touched on it quite a bit in her presentation, the Tohoku region, and Alastair mentioned it as well. But it really does give us a different side to Japan. And I think it has just as many of those kind of iconic experiences that people want from a trip to Japan. So, you know, the geisha, the sumo, tea ceremony, etc. They're all still experiences that can be had, but just in a different area, but an area that is incredibly scenic, that feels a lot more authentic, I guess, for virtue of being a little bit off the beaten track. And also it has an incredible amount of hospitality. I mean, Japan's famous for its hospitality and its warmth of its customer service and its general reception, you know, to people who want to come and enjoy the country. But I think it, you know, specifically in the north, it is quite a source of pride for locals. And I would say specifically around those areas that were affected by the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. There are some amazing stories there about how, you know, there was a lot of international aid at the time when that happened 10 years ago, or coming up on. And so there are these incredible international connections between these people who live in very remote regions, but have managed to build sort of connections worldwide, but on the basis of those interactions that I had during the recovery. And they're all just so keen and eager to give back to people who helped them and supported them internationally, and also to show them just how far they've come and extend their welcome, you know, as best they can. So I would really recommend that area from a personal perspective. Yes, I think
Okay,
that's my short answer.
Yeah. But Rebecca, we had some people ask about food and dietary ones, and I know, for instance, you're a vegetarian. And also somebody's asking about gluten-free. So yes, how easy or difficult is it for a vegetarian and indeed for gluten-free diets?
I would love to say it's easy.
Oh, we've lost the sound again. Yeah.
Oh no, am I back? Can you hear me? Yeah. Matt's nodding, so I'm going to carry on. I would love to say that it's easy, but it's not 100% there yet. If you eat fish, you're probably fine. It's very easy to avoid meat in Japan, but the real difficulty if you don't eat fish is the dashi, which is a fish stock, and that's used in a lot of things, from miso soup to simmered vegetables, and you probably won't know it's there. That said, there are several kinds of traditional cuisine that you can try. So, for example, there is Shojin Ryori. I see Matt is nodding, which is the traditional Buddhist vegetarian cuisine. So, especially in places like Kyoto and Nara, you can easily find that. Japan is also the home of things like the macrobiotic diet. So, you can find a surprising number of macrobiotic places which will have a lot of vegetarian and even vegan stuff available. For gluten-free, your best bet obviously is the cities. Tokyo has a lot of different places. And I have an article that should be coming out soon on Culture Trip about that, in which I actually recommend Inside Japan tours. Because if you don't speak Japanese, sometimes just having someone show you around at the start of your stay there, show you some of the best places, give you some ideas, can be really helpful. But in general, I would just say you need to just be prepared. So if you've got an allergy, print out one of the little cards. You can find them online very easily, which will explain what your allergy is in English and in Japanese. And you can just take that with you to a restaurant and show it. I would also say that if you really want to be super cool like me, buy yourself some tamari, gluten-free soy sauce. You can get it here, you can get it in Japan, whatever. Bring a little bottle of it around in your bag with you, and you can just take that to a sushi place and just say, no soy sauce, I have my own. And that's totally fine. And I honestly would just bust that out whenever I wanted to add some more flavor to something. So that's my top tip. But yeah, it's very, very possible, but you do need to prepare yourself. It's outside of the big places like Tokyo, it's a little more difficult, I think. Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, I think you have to be prepared to like give stuff a try as well. Like
absolutely.
Like what I've experienced when I was a tour leader, so going back a while now, but when I was taking groups around, people, as long as people are prepared to maybe eat some stuff that they wouldn't maybe eat at home, there were options to be had. But it is limited choice if you've got quite strict dietary requirements. I love the bottle of tamari though, and that's something that we send to all our gluten-free clients.
That's brilliant.
Totally. That's a great recommendation. In fact, I have a bottle here, so yeah.
Also, Indian restaurants are a great option. Everywhere's got Indian restaurants, and they've got loads of veggie and loads of gluten-free. So, if in doubt, find the local Indian restaurant.
Yeah,
absolutely. One of the things in Japan that is incredibly surprising to people, I think, is how great the non-Japanese food is. So you can eat some of the finest Italian food, some of the finest Indian food in the world, finest French food in Japan. And I challenge anyone that I mean, maybe on the Curry Mile in Manchester or Birmingham, you'll get a naan that's as good as Japan. But every single Indian restaurant in Japan sells world-beating naan bread. And if you love naan bread like me, that means you're going to spend a lot of time there.
Good grief, you never thought that. Okay, I don't know who wants to take that, this one, but we're being asked about motorhomes, camper vans and camping, which of course very much the trend at the moment. So it's Japan's set up for those. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in. I'm sure Simon will be able, Alastair will be able to help. But yes, essentially, kind of as Alastair was saying earlier, Japan's domestic tourism is so strong already, and the infrastructure is already there in a lot of ways, that things like this are very quite easily possible and are very popular amongst Japanese people as well. So camper van hire, is very much a trend that is popular in Japan too. And much like us, they drive on the right-hand side of the road, for example, and with an international drive. Oh, well, no, what I mean is they drive on the right. They drive on the correct side of the road. But yes, they drive on the same side of the road as us, and they have international driver's permits. Easy to get at the post office, and cars are easy to pick up and drop off in Japan too. So yeah, and generally signage as well on the roads is all in English. And there's a slew of glamping and camping places all over Japan as well. And I think, Japan's rail infrastructure is known worldwide for being one of the cleanest, most efficient, most comprehensive. But there are always those places that you can sort of discover just by going a little bit even more off the beaten track by car. So yeah, I mean, it's totally possible. There are a number of guides out there on how to do it on the internet, but certainly I think speaking to someone like Inside Japan, you'd be able to arrange that for yourself. I don't know if Alastair wants to add anything.
Japan is an extraordinary place to travel in any form of motor vehicle. I have to say, I have never personally arranged a motorhome, and it's not going to be a US style Winnebago. Because they're just not going to fit on the roads. But there are certainly motorhome options. But the driving routes are spectacular. There's some established routes in Japan, such as the Romantic Road, which has a lovely name, which is sort of Nagano Prefecture, north of Tokyo, through the mountains, and Gunma, which are spectacular rural areas. And along those routes, there are places to camp if you like. I don't know so much about wild camping. Matt might be able to provide more information on that, but Japan tends to be quite rule bound, and I know that sticking to official campsites would probably be advisable in most areas. The other thing that you can do in Japan, I don't know if we've got any motorbikers on the webinar here, but I hired a motorbike a few years ago and took it around the Noto Peninsula, which is a rural area north of Kanazawa City. It's called the Crooked Finger, goes out into the Sea of Japan. Very, very sparsely populated, beautiful region. And you can pick up a motorbike from nearly anywhere in Japan. The range of bikes is extraordinary, right from just basic sort of 250cc models right up to top of the range Harley Davidsons. It's quite affordable, and it's because the biking is such a culture in Japan, but people don't get that much time off, so they tend to fly somewhere or take the bullet train somewhere, pick up a bike, do some touring with their biker friends, and then go back home. So if anyone is into motorbiking, I can highly recommend that. Certainly something that's very easy to arrange, and hire a car as well. It enables you to get to those places that, you can't necessarily easily access otherwise. And what I love about driving in Japan, like especially someone in the chat mentioned Shikoku, brilliant place, tiny, small, the fourth island, not many tourists. I've cycled around there primarily, but it enables you just to stop, because there are so many interesting things just at the side of a road, or you might see an old temple or something that just looks curious, or a shop, and you can just stop and visit these places. And that's where you get those real sort of magical interactions and those little bits of gold, holiday gold, really. So yeah, motorhomes, motorcycles, cars and bicycles, all amazing ways to see Japan.
Yeah, terrific. Okay, moving on. Somebody's asking about where to get the best view of Mount Fuji. I mean, we've already had the great tip about you're probably going to most likely to get a good view in winter, but where can you get a really good view from? Who wants to take that?
Well, I'd say Simon Candy's answered that in the chat there at the top from the north side of Lake Kawaguchi. Okay. That is probably the place to view Mount Fuji from.
Okay, terrific.
Right.
Somebody else also mentioned it's great from the train.
Yeah.
Great from the train.
Yeah.
And if you're
If you're
getting the train, you can ask when you book your seat on the train, you can ask for a mountainside train, which I think is it Yamagawa? Is that what it is? I always forget.
Yeah.
But if you're going from Tokyo to Kyoto, get a seat on the right side of the train. If you're going from Kyoto to Tokyo, seat on the left side of the train, and that's your best chance of seeing it. And it is a really great view for quite a while. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
it's not,
again. It's like a little. Go on, Matthew.
Yeah. Sorry, you go. Oh. Yeah, it's not a blink and you'll miss it kind of view from the train. Provided that Mount Fuji has decided to make an appearance that day, winter is recommended for that. You will see it for probably a good couple of minutes, I'd say, flashing by. But from my experience, it kind of depends on what kind of view of Fuji you want, because there are some other really interesting places like Fujinomiya City, which literally means Fuji City. Which is right at the foot of more or less at the foot of Fuji, and I would say is maybe the closest sort of real city to Fuji. Has the Mount Fuji World Heritage Center, has a really great food culture, and also has a fantastic festival and a shrine dedicated to Fuji, and gives some amazing sort of urban views of Fuji as well. So not necessarily the traditional view that you might have, but kind of gives you an idea of Fuji as a landscape to everyday life.
Yeah, okay.
I'd say that really gets me thinking, actually. And I think the most dramatic and kind of the thing that kind of left the biggest impact on me was a view of Mount Fuji from the ferry that goes between Shizuoka and the Izu Peninsula, and that's an area called Suruga Bay. And it's just a passenger ferry that crosses the bay, multiple times a day. And from there, you get this, you really understand how close Mount Fuji is to the coast. And what I enjoyed about that is I'm a bit of a history buff and I studied Japanese history at university. And when, you think back to the era of, the 19th century when Admiral Perry parked his black ships up and kind of forced Japan to open. This was the view that these people got when they were sailing in to Japan, was this extraordinary mountain. And now if you get a cruise ship into Yokohama, if you're lucky, you'll get a similar view. But to get that view from Suruga Bay really reminded me of how dramatic arriving in Japan must have been back in the days before air travel.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That would have been magical. Just as the fireflies are magical. And Rebecca, I loved you picking up on those. I didn't realise just how appreciated they are there. And also, Alastair, I saw you'd commented on the fireflies as well. I mean, there's something so special about them. But we digress. Somebody asked about costs. Obviously Japan used to have a reputation as being incredibly expensive, and although that seems to have changed, obviously it is still a concern for people. So what is it actually like there, cost-wise? Matt, do you want to comment?
Yeah, sure. I would say the thing about Japan is that in terms of the country itself, so once you get there, in some ways it's very much like a European destination, kind of like a Western European destination. So there are ways to do it expensive if you want to. So if you really want to splash out and go for luxury, you can. If you're not so fussed and you're more about kind of the destination and the experiences, then there are ways to do it cheap as well. And generally speaking, cheap in Japan tends to mean, cleanliness standards and things in Japan are generally just a bit higher than everywhere else in the world. So what you would consider cheap in Europe might not be kind of the word cheap with negative connotation, if you see what I mean. But I think what is key to think about is the flight and kind of plan ahead around that, because the flights are really, it's an 11-hour flight, so long haul. And that's kind of what to think about. And also when you're traveling, just as we've said, so seasonality is a big thing there. So if you are, dead set on the cherry blossoms, then you will have to, factor in the kind of cherry blossom tax, I guess. Everything will just be slightly more expensive because it is busier. But that's where kind of these like off-season trips sort of come in. So winter, for example, is a favorite of mine, not just because of Mount Fuji, but also it generally tends to be cheaper. And there are like a wealth of different landscapes that are just as beautiful, I would say, and all come at generally a lower price. So yeah, I think it's a question of planning, and certainly I think, again, speaking to a specialist, doing some research as well will help you kind of around that. But I don't know if someone else wants to sort of add to
that. I have something to add, but it's not too long, don't worry. Just the other major costs on any trip that you take are going to be transport and food. A lot of my friends who live in Japan are kind of jealous of me when I go to Japan because I can get rail passes and air passes that they can't get as residents of Japan. They're the kind of thing that might look expensive, but it's a one-time cost that will give you freedom in your travel, and also actually will work out saving you a hell of a lot of money. If you're doing more than one bullet train trip, then having a Japan Rail pass is pretty much going to pay for itself. And there are so many regional Japan Rail passes as well. And it's really, really worth doing your research on those. You can get some of them in Japan, but most of them are cheaper if you get them before you travel. And then also there are air passes, for example, the Japan Airlines Explorer Pass, and I think All Nippon Airways also has a pass for domestic flights. And it's your call if you want to rely on flights internally. You might prefer the slightly more eco-friendly option of trains, but if you do want to see one end of the country to the other, it's a really economical and time-saving way of doing it. So yeah, and then food-wise, I mean, genuinely, I think it's just you have a harder time trying to find a bad meal in Japan. Really, you can eat for like very little money every day if you just go to the chains. Like I don't know, like all of them are pretty good, to be honest. I don't mean like McDonald's, I mean like Japanese chains. And you can eat from the convenience stores and get really good food. So you can get by on a pretty tight budget there if you plan a bit, and if you're okay with not going to the Michelin-starred restaurants. Even though I think Tokyo has like the highest density of Michelin-starred restaurants in the world, you don't have to go to any of them. So yeah.
Yeah. Terrific. We are going to have to wrap up in a few minutes, and we will be showing a video again at the end. People are just wondering what will be happening. But a couple of quick fire questions first. So somebody has asked for recommended reading ideas for novels or for films, something like that to prepare before you go. I mean, I would obviously say, and thank you for the plug earlier, Rebecca, that people should, if they haven't already, get the latest issue of Wanderlust, which has a fantastic, I think it's 11 or 12 pages, trip planner in there with lots of ideas for itineraries, written by a great guy, Rob Goss, who lives in Tokyo, couldn't join us tonight. He's away on assignment. And so Rebecca very gallantly did a fantastic job. But that's a really good article, so do make sure you've got that. So that's a practical one. But what about something else or something inspirational? What do you guys suggest?
Depends where you're going. Like, and if you like to, and depends who you are and what you enjoy. I mean, there's obviously the most famous Japanese novelist of his time is Haruki Murakami. And if you like kind of surreal literature, you'll love Murakami. And what's a lot of fun is to read one of his books and then pick up on the places in, say, Tokyo that are featured. And then you can go visit some of those sites. I love doing that, reading a novel and then going to visit the places that are featured. So Murakami's great. If you're... there's the David Mitchell novel, 1,000 Autumns of Jacob de Zuma, and that's set down in Nagasaki on Dejima Island, which is where was the base of the Dutch when they were, that was the kind of only relationship that Japan had with the West. And again, that if you're visiting that area, reading that novel really makes it come alive in a way that just reading some history or a tour guide isn't going to do. So, it's, I mean, there's a myriad of films and things. Maybe Lynn, I'll send you our recommended viewing and reading list, and like you can send that out to attendees if you like.
Yeah, no, that'd be terrific to get that. Okay, Rebecca, what about you? Anything you would suggest?
Well, I'll say something a bit more inspiring in a moment, but first, obviously there are a lot of guidebooks, and they're all very different depending on what you want as a traveller. From my 3 months to Japan last year, I updated the Michelin Green Guide Japan, which came out in August. And I also did a few chapters of the Rough Guide to Japan. If you can go to an independent bookshop and have a little flick through yourself, you'll see the kind of differences between different guidebooks. And you should choose based on that. Like the Rough Guide is much more off the beaten track stuff, has a lot of cultural and historical context, and actually a large section at the back of books and films of various types. So it's really good if you're looking for that kind of thing. Then a little more interesting than guidebooks would be the films of Naomi Kawase. I'm pretty biased because I wrote my dissertation about her way back in the day. But she is a brilliant filmmaker based in the Kansai region, so around Kyoto and Nara. Her name is Naomi Kawase, so like Naomi and then Kawase. I would particularly recommend The Mourning Forest, mourning like grieving, and a film called Shara, which is about a festival and like coming of age and stuff. They are beautiful. They include bits of documentary filmmaking, and they're also in the local dialect, which is quite fun to hear a different side of Japanese with English subtitles. So don't worry about that. But yeah, there are hundreds of books and films I could recommend, but I'll keep it to that for now.
Okay, and then Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I grew up with sort of Japanese pop culture and things like that, and it's obviously a hallmark of Japanese culture. But the Studio Ghibli films, you can't get better. They're incredibly heartwarming, but also feel very human. They're often referred to as kind of like the Disney of Japan, but I don't think that really does them justice. And they're always set and kind of draw inspiration from a lot of real life locations too. They're all on Netflix as well now. And Kurosawa, I'm a big fan of Akira Kurosawa, for some of the more traditional kind of Japan shots, and those kind of black and white, and I guess interesting Japanese storytelling as well. And then from a book perspective, I'm actually going to go for a non-fiction. It's a bit more kind of about Japan as a society and how it's evolved and its geography and its people. But it's called Bending Adversity, and it's by David Pilling. And it's a really interesting examination of Japan as a country, and just it's the societal kind of element. It's very balanced, and actually really inspired me to kind of find out more about Japan, go there, learn about it myself. So yeah, I think that'll be my top book recommendation.
That's a good one, Matthew. Like, I could really recommend a book called Japan Unbound by John Nathan, which is a series of essays really exploring the kind of crisis of national identity in Japan that followed the end of the bubble era, when the economy collapsed in the early 90s, and that really explores Japanese society from a variety of like different angles, and really helps you understand what Japan is, and really get beneath the surface of what you see when you're a tourist. So one of the things I'll say about Japan is it's probably the only place in the world where you can go on holiday for 2 or 3 weeks and you can be guaranteed pretty much you'll see nothing bad. Nothing bad will happen to you. You'll see a society that works brilliantly, that everything's, the trains run on time, the food's amazing, the hotels are great. And it, you can kind of come away with a bit of maybe a false impression, because all countries have their problems. And so I think it is interesting to read some of those books that maybe when you're there, give you that more rounded view of what a country is.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. You're absolutely right, Alastair. Thanks for saying that. And what would be good is if, obviously, you three could send us those recommendations that you've had, and we'll make sure that those go into the follow-up email that we'll be sending. And I've just seen a lovely comment from somebody saying that this has been the best lockdown webinar that they've been in. So, so thank you to all three of you. You've done brilliantly. So we are running out of time, though, and we do have to show a video yet. So I only want one word on. No, not one word. That's cruel. One sentence answers from you. Not one word. Ooh. No. If you had a magic carpet right now, we could transport you to Japan. Where would you want to go within Japan? Who's going to go first? Rebecca.
I'll go first.
Oh, go on. Oh.
I'll go first.
Okay,
I want to go first. So I want to give two very quick answers. The first place I'd really like to go is I'd love to be dropped into my office where my team work in Nagoya, but sadly none of them are there. But that is the number one place I'd like to go because I miss them. But tourist place or just place to be, Kamikochi National Park in the mountains in Nagano, most magical place I've ever been in my life. And it inspired me. It's what inspired me to set up the company with my business partner, Simon. So always love going there.
Oh gosh. Yeah, don't ask any more questions. We'll be here all night. Yeah, I want to know more about that. No, what a tease. What a tease. Okay, Rebecca.
My answer is actually pretty close to Kamikochi, so that area is getting a lot of plugs right now. I would say Matsumoto, because I went there for the first time last year and I only spent one night there, and it was the top place in the whole trip where I thought, oh yeah, I could live here right now. It's just full of a lot of people who've like escaped from the big city and set up their own little independent businesses. It's right by the mountains and national parks. It's very laid back. It has one of the best preserved castles in Japan. It's great. It's also where Yayoi Kusama, the artist, comes from. And it's got a great museum of her art. It's just top-notch, excellent small city. Really recommend it. Matsumoto.
Right. Again, we're going to have to capture these in the email that we go out, because this is so inspiring as well. So, and last but not least, Matthew, where would you go?
I think I would probably say the Aizu region, which is in Fukushima Prefecture, massive prefecture, but it's kind of in the western mountainous side of Fukushima. There's a beautiful scenic railway line called the Tadami line, which passes through some of villages that were voted kind of the most beautiful villages in Japan. They have amazing sake breweries. They have amazing local crafting traditions, exquisite scenery, snow festivals. They have the lot. So I think that is kind of that's my home in Japan. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much. So a massive thanks to Rebecca. What a great presentation. To Alastair and to Matt. You guys, you've got so much knowledge. It's been so inspirational. Thank you so much. And I'm afraid we are going to finish there, but we will be capturing, obviously, what you've said. We'll be sending that out to everybody. And now, just to finish off, we've got a video. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thanks again to our speakers. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.